Welcome to everyone who is logging on for our Fostering a Positive Team Environment webinar in youth sport. We are thrilled. We have some great guest speakers tonight that we're going to cover. I'm going to ask Emily really quickly to unmute. Emily Nothnagel is here from our team at Life Sports. Say hi, Emily.
Hi.
And Emily is going to navigate any issues that you have with hearing us or resources that are dropped in the chat, as well as navigate questions. So for folks on this evening, please drop them in there and know that we have a designated time where Emily will pull those up and ask our panelists to answer. But just so everyone knows, I'm Dr. Samantha Bates. I'm an assistant professor at Ohio State University. I was just telling my two guest speakers, I am not joined tonight by Q Banks because he is coaching men's basketball for OSU, so go Bucks. So it's just going to be me tonight, but I'm thrilled because I have friends and colleagues with me to talk about this fantastic topic. So here's our game plan for tonight. We're going to, as a group, kind of reflect on the ways that coaches can foster an inclusive and equitable youth sport environment. We want to talk about some of the behaviors that it takes to really build relationships and also establish trust. And then we're going to kind of identify some strategies that might increase team cohesion and really make sport a great place for kids and young people, and for all kids and young people in that regard. So just to get us started, why does environment matter? I got to do the professor, gig here where I say we know from the research that performance and relationships are interrelated. When young people and athletes feel that they're a part of something, Olympic medalists, as well as those who have their personal records set, say that their relationships were central to those successes. Environment matters for kids to stay involved in sport and experience a sense of belonging. And we know that when relationships are strong, inclusive, and respectful, that kids have greater satisfaction when playing sport. And all of those things contribute into youth development, the ability for young people to develop character, as well as strategies that help them solve problems later in life. And so these are the reasons we're talking about this topic tonight. And I am so honored and thrilled to welcome my two guest speakers this evening. I am first going to introduce Luke O'Quinn, my friend and colleague now of over 10 years. Luke O'Quinn is originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. He grew up playing soccer. We've got a whole panel of soccer on here. And fell in love with the culture and diversity of that sport. He studied at OSU, where he earned his bachelor's in social work in 2013. After graduation, he joined the College of Social Work and actually worked for the OSU Learning and Fitness and Education Through Sports, or otherwise known as Life Sports Initiative, where he's helped to implement free sports programming across Central Ohio, and also led our work for a year-round youth leadership academy that focused on making linkages between sport and preparing youth for their future career and college decisions. He was also a youth soccer coach for the Columbus Crew SC. So that's Luke's background. Thrilled and honored to say he's now the director of the Los Angeles Football Club Youth Leadership Program in Los Angeles, California, where he manages all of the operations and development of that program, including curriculum focused on life and social skills, college career readiness, and sport-based youth development. So as you can tell, he is really passionate about using sport as the platform to reach and teach our young people. So welcome everybody, Luke O'Quinn on here. Hey Luke, thanks for being with us.
Hello, happy to be here.
Yeah, good to have you. All right, next up, Dr. Andrew Mac Intosh, who is currently the Chief Program Officer for RISE, which is an education and outreach organization focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as improving race relations and advancing social justice through sport. He is passionate about understanding and enhancing the role that coaches can play in the lives of youth. He grew up playing soccer and has an amazing perspective on positive opportunities that sport can provide. Andrew spent the last 10 years sort of in the business sector, supporting organizational development, performance management, and training strategies, and then shifted into national and international work with sport. He got his degree at Michigan State University, so a fellow Big Ten here on the call, and worked closely with those at the Institute for the Study of Youth Sport, and now sort of located in Detroit. And gosh, you've been all over the country even this year, just working with tons of sport organizations. So thank you so much, Andrew, for being with us as well. The neat thing is that Luke is also a facilitator for RISE. So as we learn about that organization, we have two really amazing champions of that work. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this screen and get y'all right to the grit of the questions that we have for you. So I'm actually going to start with Andrew and then Luke, bump to you. Andrew, will you tell us a little bit about RISE and more about what your organization is up to currently?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a national nonprofit that believes that sport brings people together. I know from my time growing up in Trinidad, where I'm originally from, that a lot of the friendships that I built and a lot of the relationships actually that got me my first job were actually built on the soccer pitch, right? Friends that I met, colleagues that I met, lifelong friends. And so because sport brings people together, RISE believes it's a good place for us to have some more difficult and challenging conversations. Certainly everyone would be aware that the conversations around race can be polarizing, but we really believe they can be had in a positive and a productive way. So sport is that place for us to do that. So that's what RISE does. We host conversations, we educate folks about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and are really trying to end racism in the society more broadly, but also, using sport as a platform and a vehicle to do that. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned, it's a platform not only for you to build relationships, but then to have those difficult conversations and bridge different communities and topics. So that's incredible. Luke, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us a little bit about the LAFC Youth Leadership Program and what you're up to in Los Angeles.
All right. So the LAFC Youth Leadership Program is a leadership development program for high school students where we teach, mentor, train the high school students to be community leaders and coaches and mentors to younger students. And we empower them with the skills and resources to go out to local schools, and they coach local kids in soccer classes. Not a huge emphasis on specific soccer skill development, but teaching leadership skills, life skills, and creating a safe space for them to play in South and Central Los Angeles. So we have a college and career readiness component as well, but the main part of the internship and program is empowering high school students with the responsibility to coach and mentor younger kids.
Very cool. So the bridge here being both of you are really using sport to bring communities together, strengthen the assets that we have, including our empathy and compassion toward one another. And I'm going to brag on your program, Luke, helping kids get to college and career and planning for that next step and using sport as the mechanism to do that. Fill their resume. Your kids talk about the communication skills and the social emotional learning and things that happen by having to lead others, even if it's younger kiddos. Just the reflection and growth that can happen. So amazing to have both of you. I'm going to open it up and just kind of let you all spitball and brainstorm a little bit, but talk to me about the importance of fostering a positive team environment in sport. Why would that be important for you? Andrew, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Samantha. So, I would say, and just starting from that research base as well, because I think it's important, right? Most kids and young people drop out of sports because it is no longer inclusive for them, right? I have two 9-year-olds, I have twins, and they love going to play soccer because it's a welcoming environment. It's a place where they feel like they're appreciated by their coach. It's a place where they feel they can contribute, they can lead, they can really kind of demonstrate all that they can truly be. So, at a minimum, we see that, once young people hit 11, 12, 13, it's where they no longer feel like this is a safe space for them. And I mean safe in all senses of the word. They no longer feel they can be themselves. Their identities are shifting just because of, adolescence and, the things that they're going through. And so it's, I think, even more important at that age, and especially for young women as well, to just really find a place where they can be valued. So, at a minimum, especially now that we're thinking about how do we get more young people participating in sport, staying active, staying healthy, we have to be really, cognizant of how we are creating a space where they feel like they can do that, and they feel they can really kind of step in and be all that they can be, so to speak.
Yeah, I heard it was both personal and professional, using data and science to say kids are dropping out at 12 and 13, which means we're losing a huge group of young people engaged in a space that can be really healthy and protective for the rest of their developmental years. And then I heard you say your 9-year-olds love going and are having fun, and you smiled about it. It just made me think of the play and how good that is, that we get to try things through play relationships and get to figure out how to navigate the world, and just the importance of that when you're even talking about your kiddos there. So I certainly can see the importance of it from your perspective. Luke, talk to us from your perspective. What's the importance of fostering that positive team environment?
Yeah, so to echo what Andrew had shared there, I agree with everything, and more to add to the importance is, we play sports, or often play sports, because it's a fun activity. We get to practice physical activity. And there's also like this urge to win or score, to, make the basket, and to create, performance, or the quality of performance. It's helpful if, the players on that team are comfortable and they feel like they belong, and they feel safe and happy. And when players are safe and happy, they often play better, or meeting their expectations on the side of quality and performance. But even beyond that, and Andrew just touched on it, when we participate in physical activity, we start to create happy chemicals in our brain, where we start to feel better, open to learning or trying new things. So even if a training session or activity might seem difficult at first, when you're in a positive team environment, if you have teammates that support you, that aren't going to put you down or shame you, you're more than likely to try that and even do better than what you had thought in the beginning. So, sport is such a powerful tool in so many different ways, but particularly for just self-development, it creates a really cool scenario to grow yourself in a safe environment. And I think as coaches or sport leaders, we have a really awesome opportunity to create that space. And I know we'll talk about the different techniques and strategies soon, but just for self-growth and development, sport has that power, and it starts with that positive, safe team environment.
Yeah, I even heard you say, like, it makes it okay to take a risk, which I think is so important for young people. And I think it teaches you how to take initiative later, right? And then also how to navigate relationships when that risk is maybe a negative outcome, or how to get back up right after the adversity. And so growth often happens after we failed and we reflected on it, and then we go back and we try again. And so I think, Luke, to your point, it creates this opportunity to maybe fail or take a risk, learn from it, and then self-evaluate and get better, which, honestly, right now is so important for our young people, and creating more opportunities for that post-COVID feels really critical at this time. So what also, I'm curious, are the ways that you think coaches can use sport to promote equity and inclusion? I'd be curious, as you're both affiliated with RISE and leading in that space, talk to us about equity and inclusion as well.
Yeah, I think sport is, just a wonderful space, kind of going off of what Luke had shared, to really engage young people. Like I said, my 9-year-olds will literally do anything for their coaches, right? And so, how can you leverage that relationship and their motivation and engagement in the sport to teach them and educate them? So leadership is something that they can learn through that. But just appreciating differences, right? So, on a soccer team, you have different positions, right? So you can talk about, the differences you're going to meet with people in the world. And how do you adjust and adapt so that you are able to work with them and work in tandem with them to achieve a common goal, right? Sport is just such a powerful metaphor, I think, for the ways in which society ought to function. Nelson Mandela, famously said, sport can change the world, right? And he kind of really leveraged that to bring about social change in his country of South Africa post-apartheid, for that very same reason. People love sport. We all do. I think it's estimated that about 20 million or 30 million young people in this country play organized sport each year. All of us, I'm sure on this call especially, can remember a time where we participated in organized sport and really had fun and enjoyed it. And so, sport is just that place where I think, if nowhere else, people can feel welcome. And so for us, at RISE, and for me specifically, I really do believe it's a place where people can be included, ought to be included, and to Luke's point, just really just try new things. There are all types of sports out there. I mean, soccer is close and dear to my heart. But you may not be good at soccer, but you might be good at basketball. You may not be good at lacrosse, but you can do ice skating. So there's a sport out there for everyone, which I also think makes it really wonderful as well.
Absolutely. As you were talking, I kept thinking it's this space where we're working toward a collective goal. And similar to what Luke said, we also fail together and self-evaluate, negotiate, and regroup, which I think right now is a really important, concept to talk about across differences, abilities, communication styles, race, gender, all of these different things, that it's an opportunity to reflect, get to know each other, try new things together, and fail. Luke, for you, you're working with a group in Los Angeles. How do you see coaches using sport to promote equity and inclusion?
Sure. So you see it in a lot of different ways, but I think one, just allowing, the students, the kids, teenagers, et cetera, to be on the team. There can be prerequisites, but nothing as far as like ethnic or racial backgrounds, but just the ability to play, to run. And if you're able to participate, you can be on the team. I think there's really cool ways, like with individual teams, creating norms within that team. So things like when you arrive to a training session or game, like everyone on the team has to shake each other's hands. So similar to what Andrew had shared, like we need to appreciate our differences with each other. A team of just strikers or just defenders is not going to be that strong of a team, but having multiple skills where you can rely on each other, empower those of a certain skill set for certain roles, and you can all contribute to that common goal. But something even along of just shaking each other's hands on the team, but creating that norm. So at the end of a match, we're still going to show respect, or the end of the game or a tournament, we're still going to show respect to that other team as well, regardless of what they look like, how much money this club has, or something like that, or how nice the uniforms are. We're still going to show respect regardless of a win or loss. And that, understanding that coaches have a unique spot of not being a school teacher and not being, a mother or father in that household, where maybe that student or kid isn't having a comfortable time at school or a comfortable time at home, and they are going to this place to, relieve stress or kind of express themselves in their own way. And as coaches, we need to allow them to express themselves. If they want to do it by running a little bit faster than they should, or going a little bit harder into a tackle or up for a rebound, we need to allow them to express that their side of their personality, because the more likely they are to be themselves and feel safe as themselves and not shamed, like I said before, their quality is going to increase more, and that trust with the coach is going to be built.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, even when you think about the power that comes with the coach position, right? And the way that you can be an ally or an advocate, I think is important, Luke, when you were talking about like, maybe it's, I'm having a hard time at home and I don't quite feel safe talking about this there, or maybe school's feeling, hard or challenging too. Coaches have this opportunity to be that like ally and advocate and source of support, which I think is really important when we talk about issues of equity and inclusion. Sport may be the place I feel included, and then also helping me develop or navigate systems where else I don't feel included could be really important.
Samantha, I just want to add as well, I mean, even from like a physical development standpoint, right? If you think about it, some of us are going to hit, puberty or adolescence a little earlier than others. We hit a growth spurt, we get bigger, we get stronger. I won't bore people with too much of the research here, but, suffice it to say, because we hit puberty at different points, our skill sets, our abilities, all of those things vary as well. So you could very well find that someone who was the tallest player and probably playing center at age 12 on their basketball team, by the time they get to 17, 18, they are the shortest person on the basketball team, right? And so, it also allows for, I think sport also allows for people to adapt and adjust and grow as well, and just really show our differences, right? And it really calls to bear as well, I think, overall, just a question of identity. So much about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think, is about how we make sense of our identity. and how others make sense of our identity, right? It's less about who we are and more the ways in which society makes sense of it and we respond to that. So, sport also allows for some of those conversations, some of those spaces, it really builds some bonds that I think are important, right? People put aside their differences to play on the same team, right? Doesn't matter what your race, doesn't matter your religion, doesn't matter where you're from. In some cases, it doesn't even really matter how good you are at the sport. You know what I mean? I used to play every Friday, have a scrimmage in Trinidad where, some people were really great and some, but we really all gathered to have the drinks afterwards and to, talk about work and to share and so on. And so, again, that putting aside the differences, I think is some of the ways in which sport can really allow to do that. And then the last thing I'll say is this, because I think it's important just to recognize this. There have been a number of athletes through the years who have really used sport as a platform to advocate for equity and equality. And, certainly Nelson Mandela did that. But John Carlos, Tommy Smith, Muhammad Ali, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, or all folks who've really done that. There've been a recent crop of athletes who've done a lot more of it. But again, right, sport has just historically, I think, as well, been a space where people could have done that and just have that platform to have these conversations.
Absolutely. Seeing sport as that platform to advocate and have conversations. I'm going to kind of throw the script out a little bit and talk to you both about how you recommend coaches do this. I'm going to get to the strategy part. So you just mentioned one of the most important things is our identity, how we perceive, ourselves, and then how others perceive us, and thinking about identity and really learning about, with, and among each other, right? So I'm going to throw out to both of you, if you were to say the steps a coach could take to start to foster that positive team environment, where would you tell them to start?
Listening, which I think is difficult for coaches sometimes. As a coach and as a parent as well, right? We feel like we are supposed to have the answers and we are supposed to know and we're supposed to direct and instruct. But really, when you're talking about things like inclusion, it's really starting with someone else feeling like they belong, right? And so for them to feel like they belong, they need to feel like you're hearing them. They need to feel like more than that you're listening to them. And I think, a lot of young people are pretty open to feedback if they feel like they themselves are being heard. And that, I think, at times can be difficult. So one of the biggest pieces that I often say in my work with coaches and with parents is really that listening piece, starting with, do you even want help? Do you even want advice, right? Which might seem like a little bit radical for some coaches out there, but sometimes, I have players come and just talk to me. And at the end of it, my question to them is, okay, so, you just told me a lot. It sounds really frustrating, really difficult, really challenging,
Yeah.
How can I help you now? Do you want me to give you some advice? Do you want me to just, hold that? Did you just want to share? And that kind of makes them feel like they're in charge of their own kind of lives, their own careers, their own experiences. And again, everything in life is balanced. So I'm not saying you always respond that way. Sure. Certainly not. But, again, young people need to feel like they are being heard.
Yeah. And listening and recognizing all of the things happening in their life and then saying, what do you need from me? Because sometimes it's not advice. It's, coach, I just needed to tell you and I needed you to hear me. And it's funny. My motto is like, hear me, see me, value me. And then we could do the actual work. Right. Luke, where would you start? Because I have some thoughts I want to share too, but where do you start when you're thinking about fostering this positive team environment and climate?
Yeah, so definitely want to echo what Andrew had shared there. I think another step, whether it's before or after asking questions, is some self-evaluation and reflection too, of like, how are you already showing some of the values that you want your team to show, or if you are at all. And maybe check on some insecurities or any biases that might already be in place, because you need to be aware of what might show up, in your training sessions, these parent meetings, just the individual feedback with your players and your team. And then another step I would take, whether it's right before the season starts or a week or two in. But I think something non-sport related can be really healthy. So maybe during a scheduled time, instead of training, it's like a pizza party, or and you're sharing questions, or you go laser tag or something like that. That gets them out of the typical environment you're going to be in for however many months, or only see you in that environment on the field with a hat on and a whistle. So they need to see coach in a different light, and you also need to see them in a different light as well. And it can be strictly something fun, but you can also add in something like sharing your story, or asking other students or players to share their story as well. And the more that you can share as a coach, to create that understanding with your players, the players are going to feel a little bit more safe, and create a sense of bond and trust with you as well.
I love that. So starting with the fun activity, see me as coach, and then see me as person, right? And really building that rapport of like, there is identity in being the coach, and there's also this laser tag event where we are just together and building relationships. You all were making me think about, usually at the start of a class when I'm teaching at Ohio State, I get a note card and say, what do you need from me? And then what do you not need me to do? Right? Like, what do you not need me to do in this class? And sometimes it's like not, have me be the only woman of color and use, and put me on the spot in that, which is something that I've experienced in my classrooms as we're diversifying at Ohio State. I've also had the like, hey, I didn't grow up going to a private school, so I'm worried my writing isn't going to be really good. I need really good feedback. But when I think about the translation of that to the sport environment, it's like, hey, coach, I need you to see or know or hear this about me. And then I also need you to not reinforce something that maybe has been done to me in the past, or is something from my, something maybe a past coach or teacher has done, right? That's negatively hurt that relationship. And then interestingly, I do the same one where I say what I need, right? So I need you to come to me and not kind of go to the other classmates, like bring problems to me. And then, what I don't need. And so I wonder too about when we think about inclusion, it's like everyone has needs here, and then everyone has a boundary, and maybe getting some of those things set up early could be great places for coaches to start. Andrew, you want to jump on?
Yeah, I want to just piggyback off of that. Because I do think, it's the setting of what I would call shared norms and community guidelines, the different terms for it. But definitely that's helpful. What does respect mean in this space, and how do we engage with one another? But I think one of the things that you kind of stressed on there that I wanted to amplify was just that vulnerability, right? That modeling, right? How do you as a coach and as a leader model what you would like your young people to be doing? So, you just shared, hey, I asked them, but then I also tell them what I would also like them to do and not do. And I think that's helpful, right? Because again, I think ultimately sport is that space where as coaches and leaders, we are teaching, and it's not just teaching the X's and O's. It's not just, lacrosse and tennis and jump shot and so on, but it's those leadership skills. It's those emotional regulation skills. It's those socio-emotional skills. It is, skills like empathy and perspective taking. We just have such wonderful opportunities and coachable moments, I think, in sports. So how do we seize them? And even further, I would say, how do we plan for them? So how do we create them with some intentionality, so we can then leverage it?
Yeah. So building off that, again, you two can throw something at me later, but you're bringing up such great points. I can't help but go there. These shared expectations. I'm going to be vulnerable and say sometimes they are biased by my experiences and how I think someone might need to behave. Or, Luke, I know you're working with the Hispanic and Latino population in LA, and my norms may be very different. So I want you to talk to us about, how do we set shared norms and expectations, knowing that we're all bringing our unique backgrounds to that sport environment? Any recommendations for coaches as they work on that?
Can I go first, Luke?
Sure. Yeah. So I think in order to, there has to be some healthy conversation. Like an environment has to be created where, people feel comfortable to share. So like, we're not holding things back. So I think there's some, activities, some get to know you stuff that goes into it first. but having conversations on like what the goals are, like what are we expecting to get out of this season, or, you know, out of this team environment. And then kind of working backwards. Okay, so to do that, like, what do we need in our training sessions, or like, how do we need to prepare for stuff like that? And so trying to create a collective conversation, and it's, I think, shared expectation, but like agreed upon expectations from the team. So, you know, similar to what you said, Sam, it can't just be the coach writing down the rules and saying this is how we're going to follow, but like asking, what do you guys want out of this? Or, you know, what do we feel like is, you know, reasonable for us? Bringing up maybe some instances or scenarios that happened in some training sessions prior. Like, do we feel like this is healthy for our team? Do we feel like this is conducive to playing better? Just seeing what the responses are like from the group. And I mean, best case scenario is that there's going to be some players on the team that you know, are confident and brave with their voice, and they can help drive some of the conversation. So it's not just from the adult staff leader or coach, but someone within the team. You know, if captains have been selected, or, you know, kind of just known or appointed, that they can use that voice, and like the team's voice is what's creating those shared expectations, and not necessarily the coach. But I think it's like just creating an environment where they feel like they can share first. So it's going to take some shared, you know, telling your story, you know, the hardest experience of my life, the best coach, the worst coach in my life, and why. And then, you know, funny questions like, you know, your favorite cartoon, favorite superhero, that just, you know, shows that we're more than just footballers or basketball players or tennis players as well. Yeah.
That was great. I love that you said like some play can be in there, because when you say your favorite cartoon character and I say that's awesome, instead of what, you're so weird or different, like when I just let you show up in that space and be a kid or be a young person and say, this is my favorite video game, this is my favorite ice cream flavor. And then we get into the, Luke, I mean, you're kind of the master at this. You taught me this. Then we get into the more serious, like, what would a hard day look like here? You do the roses and thorns, right? So the best part of your day and the worst part of your day. And you always modeled that stayed really safe, which then allowed everybody to go deeper, because there was trust that no matter what bad thing or great thing I shared about my day, my team let me just kind of say it and lay it out there and didn't use it against me or anything like that. So I just want to give kudos to you that you do that really nice job of creating that psychological safety up front, to then allow the voice to feel like it gets louder, which then builds those team norms. Andrew, thoughts about what I said? So I said, sometimes you bring a bias into what the expectation should be, but how can we do that in a way that's really inclusive of our student athletes?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I'll go back to just centering identity and identities. And just really, I think, starting by illustrating that we are all different. You know, diversity literally means difference. It's a synonym. I think a lot of people equate it with race or equate it with gender, but it literally just means difference. And so if you think about it in that way, each and every single one of us is different. You know, even if we all white or we all black or we all Trinidadian, right? There's some aspect of our identity that is different. And so that's the only constant. Difference is what the only constant is. And so, you know, if you start there and center difference as you know, part of the conversation, then you can have a conversation and a dialogue about the differences in our experiences, the differences in our backgrounds, you know, not just our racial differences or ethnic differences. And I think what often happens is that it's those things we can see on the surface that kind of get called out because they're visible and they can be seen. And we don't think as much about the ways that we are similar that we don't see, and perhaps even the ways in which we're different that we don't see either, right? You know, so Luke talks about, hey, you know, talking about comic books or music, etc. And I've found that using activities like that are really good to have people talk about, hey, well, you know, I love Bruno Mars too, right? So that's something Sam didn't know about me. So now we could connect. We could connect on that and on that level, or we could connect on laser tag, as the case might be. So, you know, if you center difference in that way, then I think any topic that comes up now, whatever it might be, even, who supported Argentina to win the World Cup, right? You could have a real open, honest conversation with your players about, well, hey, this is why I like Argentina. I grew up with Maradona, et cetera, et cetera. They might share, well, I prefer Gabriel Batistuta, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry, a lot of soccer references here.
Here we go.
But because I'm a lover of the game. But identity, I think vulnerability, really centering difference and acceptance of this is life. We are all different. None of us is exactly the same. If we start there, I think we're in a really good space.
Absolutely agree. I love that you said difference is the only constant, right? And so we are all different, whether it's something we're battling or struggling with, whether it's something about our identity, it's something about our past experiences, it's our current self-talk that can all be different. I mean, all of these things can be different. And you said, but let's also look for the similarities. So, Bruno Mars, thank you in the house, shout out. I don't know if I can back you up on Argentina here to win, winning the World Cup. I was really sad. They had a great game, but I am hearing you say we can even just find commonality right there and laugh and make humor. And now we're closer in that we both love soccer, right? Because we know we can show up and say Messi's the best in the world, right? Okay, so I'm going to do one more question. We're going to cover 3 concepts from our Coach Beyond curriculum, and then we're going to open it up for questions. If you two could wave a magic wand right now and tell our coaches one thing to do that helps to create a positive or inclusive team environment, what can you leave us with to our community of coaches on this call and those that will watch in the future? So wave that wand. What's one thing they can do?
Go ahead, Luke.
Okay. So Andrew said this already, but this was something that I'd written down when we saw the question. So I'm gonna co-sign with it. But it's to be vulnerable, show vulnerability as a coach. Like, I don't think I realized this when I was playing a lot, but when I was coaching, it was something like we asked the team and the players to do so much uncomfortable situations, playing when they're losing, playing when they're injured, or when it's cold and rainy, playing when they don't think they're good enough. And so we are putting them in very uncomfortable situations. Hopefully we are encouraging them with belief, like the team environment, the support, and all of that. But, if you're not showing any vulnerability, I don't know how we can expect our players and our team to do that as well. I mean, even just some of the movements in sports, just you're twisting and turning your body in such weird ways that it's not how the body is, created, that we need to show that vulnerability. And then, I think a lot of coaches do this already, but I want to encourage this and just validate it as well. But just certain lines like, I believe in you, I'm proud of you, I love watching you play. All of those can go a lot further than, oh, you should have taken your time or should have taken another touch, or like, why didn't you, pass it to him? And so just to validate that we see you showing effort and out here, contributing to the team, you showed up for the team, and that matters a lot. And then I think the last part, I know there's a lot, but just share your story. All right. So, how you got here, why you're here, why you want to be here. Could be doing a lot of other things, but I chose to coach this team right now because of this, and this. And yes.
Love that. Share your story, right? Make sure that, you're vulnerable and modeling that. And it sounds like a lot of this is communicating that you care and you believe in your athletes, which sets the stage for more trust and relationships and also inclusivity. Andrew, what for you? If you could wave a magic wand and tell coaches, something to do to help foster this positive team environment in youth sport, what would it be?
I think don't make the assumption that your young people know about this. I think all young people see differences. Like I said, right? They're perceptive, they're intelligent, right? A lot of them are super smart, smarter than I am for sure. So they are going to process it in one way or the other. And again, you really have a valuable role to play in helping them do that and helping them do that in a positive and a productive way. And so I think, a lot of times coaches are afraid maybe to bring up the topic, might be afraid to have the conversation for a number of reasons, right? well, what am I going to say when they start asking questions? Or I'm going to look like I don't know what I'm doing in this space, right? So I think it ties into the vulnerability piece as well. But like really just have create a space for it, and it might be once a month, it might be once a week, whatever the cadences that you think works well. But don't assume that they understand and they get it totally. They're there to learn, they're there to grow, and that'd be my biggest piece for coaches in some way, even if it's small, even if everybody says, wow, I knew this already. Create a space where you can have that conversation, because you never know who needed it. You never know who it plants a seed for. A seed that might be watered and grows, 10 years, 15 years down the road, perhaps. But that's one of the ways I think that a lot of young people feel seen and feel heard. It's coaches and other adults in their lives who kind of said, hey, let's talk about this for 5 minutes and let me just get your thoughts on what this is or what these things are. So I think that creating that space is important.
Yeah, I love that. I think too, Andrew, as I'm listening, I keep thinking about, even if you don't know, you're creating this growth mindset and learning space to say like, hey, I screwed up, or hey, I'm still learning this. And guess what? If diversity is the constant, we should always be learning in that space, because it's always going to be there. And so I think too, when you were just talking, it's also standing up and saying, we're always going to be working on this, because diversity and difference is always going to be a constant here. We have similarities, we're working toward a common goal, and let's use this space to navigate those differences. And they're not going to go away. You're going to go into the workplace, you're going to go to college, and you're going to experience that constant. And so doing it in sport gives them really assets as they develop as young people to be successful later.
Absolutely. Just become used to it. Because I think people shy away, right? But it's okay. It's okay. It's okay to have a little bit of tension, a little bit of awkwardness. We're going to work it out together as a team, because that's how we work everything out, as a team, as a group, heading into building that resilience. So yeah.
Love that. That's great. So I'm going to make you two think about resources and strategies, and Emily is also monitoring the chat. But really quick, just for everybody on the call, we want to talk about, at Coach Beyond, we are trying to reach coaches across Central Ohio, and all the things that Luke and Andrew just talked about really align with this training that we can bring out to schools and districts, where we ground this training on fostering a positive team environment around the word try. You have to try. You have to try to keep learning. You have to do that 5 minutes, like Andrew said. And this includes trust, building relationships, and creating an inclusive team culture. And so for coaches, we just want to leave you with 3 strategies. So critical to what we just talked about with Luke and Andrew is developing trust on teams. And these are some of the evidence-based ways that we know lead to trust, whether it's coaches and athletes or athletes and athletes. But one of the first is knowing each other's boundaries, what's okay and what's not okay. And that should be said explicitly, right? So as a coach, it might be, here's what I need from you. And if this happens, this might have to be the consequence, but also hearing from your athletes, things that you may do or parents may do and what their boundaries are around those different things. Trust comes from being reliable, doing what you say you're going to do, and also not over-promising. It comes from being held accountable, both in showing that vulnerability, Luke, and saying like, hey, I messed up, right? And then also holding your athletes accountable in ways that you've co-decided on together. So what would be that consequence if XYZ happens? Let's agree on that. Really central to trust is developing confidence, or the vault. I think it's important, as you all are coaches of young people, maybe high school or younger, that you say, hey, if I expect that you're in trouble, I'm going to include a parent, and be really upfront about that, so that a student athlete knows kind of, again, your boundaries and what is safe and what can be held in confidence. Having integrity, they're watching you to do the right thing when no one's looking. So having integrity as coaches. And then Andrew, you said this really well. Listening is generous, and it is highly non-judgmental when done right. And so these are kind of the ways that we build trust with our athletes and on teams. Relationships, you all really spoke about this. We didn't get as much to the nonverbal. I just finished a book by a Holocaust survivor, and she said, how do you spell love? Time. And she said, time is one of the most important things that you can do to develop relationships. And that also includes making eye contact, open body language and showing that you have a genuine interest. And then I love what Andrew said. This is active listening. I'm not going to try to fix it. I might just hold it for you, really get to know what's going on, and validate that, hey, that test today was really hard. And I'm right here. I hear that. I don't need to go back and say, when I was your age, or, hey, that other kid did really well, go use them as a tutor. I just need to say, it sounds like you had a hard day, right? And validate that experience. And then finding things that we have in common, like my Bruno Mars and anti-Argentina soccer, right? And then you all touched on this one. Just when you try, it's really important that you work collectively toward having shared values, beliefs, norms, figuring out what the attitude and climate should be of the team, and doing this in collaboration with your student athletes. So those are our ways that we at Coach Beyond feel like coaches can try to foster this positive team environment. So I'm now going to have Emily here, and she is going and Luke, let's open it up to some questions.
All right. I lost you for a minute there, Sam, but I'm going to take it away with some questions. Thank you so much for sharing those strategies with us. And thank you, Andrew and Luke, for your insights. We've got some cool stuff coming your way. One question is, what importance do you place on parental involvement in this process of fostering a positive team environment?
I mean, I'd say it's very important. Certainly, I believe that it takes a village, certainly to raise a child. And the more times that children hear things that are consistent and aligned, the better. So if, you are doing it as a coach and then, the parent is reinforcing it at home, I think that certainly is helpful. But I'll go in another direction as well and say that a lot of the research that I have done has been on mentoring, and the ways in which coaches play a role that many times some young people, unfortunately, are not getting at home for a variety of reasons and circumstances. And so sometimes they aren't hearing it anywhere else. And I would say, yes, absolutely, it'd be great if parents were on board and sharing that. But sometimes, as a coach, again, it's about difference, right? Introducing folks to new ideas, things they may have never heard before, etc. I think, in my approach, I've always just been transparent. So, parents know this is who I am. This is how I approach my conversations, not hiding anything from parents, but definitely I think if they can be involved, they should be.
I would definitely echo what Andrew had just shared. It's very important. The same expectations you're creating with the team and the team is sharing and putting input in, that should also should be shared with the parents as well. A meeting before the season starts, and similar to what Andrew said, like it does take a village. We need our values and the rules and the boundaries to be reinforced on both ends. Especially if your parent, wants to see your team win. And, it's helpful if they're sharing some of the same strategies or encouraging the same things that the coach would encourage. So the shared expectations, being transparent and vulnerable with the parents is all very important to creating that positive environment.
I love that. I would jump on and say that same time is kind of relevant to building relationships with parents. And so making sure there is time that you're accessible so that any miscommunications or expectations get clarified too. And that trust is built that way with parents as well. Emily, what's next?
We have a question in here. Sometimes on teams, especially I think with high school athletes, we can kind of find cliques forming within the team itself. Do you have any tips or recommendations for how you can kind of create a more cohesive environment and help kind of break up those cliques and get everybody to participate more?
I'll take two different approaches. Again, all contexts are different. So I don't necessarily assume that one way is going to work universally, but one approach, that I've seen work, and I'll actually drop a handout in the chat and I hope people can download it. But to Luke's point, right? Just an activity about what, just types of identities that we have, right? And getting people to recognize that we're not just Black, or we're not just tall, or we're not just bald-headed, right? Which are some of my descriptors to myself. I think that's really helpful, right? Just to for folks to recognize that there are things that they might have in common that they may not have known of. I remember working with a team once, and one of the young ladies was a gymnastics team, and one of the young ladies had a twin sister, and her teammates did not know that. And it only came out because we did that activity, right? And so, again, right, as many spaces as you can have to create sharing, I think is important. So that's one thing that can work well. The other thing that I think, and this might be a slightly different approach, is, hey, I noticed that we have a lot of cliques forming, and folks are sticking to people who are of the same race and the same ethnicity. Why do we think that is? And again, that might be a little more challenging of a conversation to have, if you're not maybe as used to it, but it has also been quite effective, because you'd be surprised. The young people would say to you, here's why we are doing that. And again, it creates that deliberate space and that intentional space to have those conversations as well.
Yes. So a few things. I mean, Andrew hit a lot of the points that I would share. Playing, games that aren't sports related, like just simple likes, dislikes, like the preferences, like this or that, like a Coke or Pepsi, and you have to run certain sides, or just things like that. I think as a coach, you have like a very cool privilege to have like the power to split up teams how you want it. So you can split groups up to how you feel like kids should be paired up that aren't usually paired up. I love Andrew's suggestion around just having that conversation and being direct. I think depending on the age group, you could also empower one of the leaders or captains on the team, like, hey, I know I'm noticing this right now. Like, what do you think? Like, what do you think we could do about it? Like, is this how it is outside the team too? Are there separate group chats that maybe we could create our own one? Is there something you could do after practice or training that is youth led, that we can include everyone? So try to empower, the team within to address, that I guess issue.
Yeah, I like that. I would jump in and piggyback kind of, Luke, what you said. I think even in the college classroom, sometimes I'll have a bucket and you have to pull a number and that's your group for the day and you have to sit with them. And some of what I'm doing is trying to get you've had 3 together and now you choose to sit with your people that feel comfortable, but you're never going to get out of that unless you're kind of forced to take that risk and go do it. And then by the end of the semester, they're just naturally all kind of doing their thing. I think the other thing for clicks is some of that is I'm trying to find where I belong. And some of that work can come back to the team of doing activities around we, like what are, using even the word we, or there's like studies that show even saying the class of 2025, and you call them that every time. And you're even modeling that this is family, this is we all belong here. And so some of it's just the coach not saying like this group or that group, or you're kind of the collective voice that brings them back together. Yeah, it's a good question. Let's do 2 more.
Okay, so we talked about the importance of building trust when we're developing this positive team environment, but as we all know, we're all human and we're bound to make mistakes. So what kinds of techniques or strategies could a coach use to kind of regain trust in the event that they have somehow broken it?
Yeah, again, it's that modeling and that vulnerability for me. Start by apologizing. And I read something recently that talked about how do you apologize properly? Because I think, it's not I regret that you felt that way, but just genuinely saying, hey, I am sorry, and then list it, right? I try to teach my twin boys this because they're always fighting, right? So I'm like, hey, no, you need to tell them why you are apologizing. What are you apologizing for? And truly let people understand that you see them and understand the way in which your behavior or lack of behavior impacted them. I think that's one piece, and then the other piece is patience, because just totally understand that if you break somebody's trust, they're not gonna flip around in a second or 2 seconds and trust you to that same level again. And I think sometimes we might get impatient and be like, well, I apologize. What's wrong with you? I apologize. But sometimes you just need to be patient. You need to continue to model those good behaviors again that are going to then allow somebody to regrow that trust.
Yes, to echo Andrew, you need to own up to the mistake, own up to your responsibility, show your vulnerability, share that it wasn't my intention, but this is what happened, and I'm sorry. And then to Andrew's point, yeah, the patience, building trust takes time. This is something I learned from Brene Brown, but trust isn't built in one sweeping action. It's a bunch of little actions, showing up on time, remembering your names. Maybe if it's like a favorite snack or something you're bringing that day. But it's a lot of very small actions. And with the team, you're going to have to do it with a lot of different players. Like it's not just going to be a blanket action that, fixes it. So being patient and owning up to your mistake.
Yeah, totally. Trust is like putting marbles in the jar, right? And then when you lose trust, a marble goes out and you have to rebuild it and put it back in using those kind of braving, being reliable, keeping people's confidence. That's a really great one. Emily, if it's okay, I'm going to grab this last one and try to bring Les and Bill's question together that I might just be getting in the Q&A. So, one of our coaches says, sometimes my kiddos are kind of congratulating those of their own, maybe racial group or age group, and, wanting tennis players to kind of mingle and learn with each other, have more sort of camaraderie across different groups. And then Bill also asked for team building strategies. So Andrew and Luke, can you take us home with, a strategy that you could do to help these two coaches kind of help foster a positive team environment? Maybe one more strategy for the situation when kids are, Andrew, you kind of answered this, have the conversation, right? About why that's happening. But what else?
Yeah, but I think as well, finding ways to make that sharing the norm. Like one of the things that I typically do when I have a group is I start with good news, right? And it's nothing that is sport related. They tell me the good news since we last got together. Everybody goes around and shares one thing, right? So you are again creating a space, making it intentional, but also modeling, because you have to share as well. You don't get to pass and say, hey, here's what my good news was for the week. And I think, again, right, that allows everybody to hear from one another, allows everybody to kind of to see what everybody is doing. So I think that's another way that you can use.
So I'm struggling thinking of new strategies right now. However, I would double down on the simple get to know you questions. And again, it does not have to be sport related. You could twist and turn certain activities to make you have to do a volley, you run to a certain side, answer a question, find a new partner kind of thing. But just to learn about each other, because, more than likely, I think, Sam, you mentioned this, they're forming these cliques because they're naturally comfortable. They're finding a sense of identity. However, they're so comfortable that they may not want to engage in an uncomfortable conversation with someone they don't know. But if you can facilitate that, reassure that this is a safe environment, that you're doing it too. Like, coach, you need to be one of the participants in those activities as well and be a kid with them, or whatever. If it's high school, middle school, elementary school, you need to go where they go. And I think the other part of the question I noticed was around working with elementary to middle and then moving to high school students. And this probably isn't what you're hoping to hear, but I've found a lot of activities are transferable across age group, framed and presented the right way with the right enthusiasm. I think you can make adjustments around some physical difficulty to maybe the high school students would make it a little bit more rigorous. But oftentimes, questions that we use in our community circles at our program are the same for the high school students as they ask the elementary students. And I often use those questions with the staff, on my team as well, just as a tester. So it's not as, I guess, difficult as it may just kind of be presented up front. I think if we're framed correctly and you go in with the right mindset, they'll be, willing to participate and hear you.
Totally. I found the same thing. You're going to laugh, but I can do the same, is cereal a soup with a college student, and I can take it to the elementary school and everybody laughs. Everybody has the best time, right? I call them Dr. Bates debates, but is water wet? And the little elementary kids are like, I don't understand the question, but you just throw these out and you make every kid get a new partner, someone they haven't talked to, and just throw out fun questions. keep it light. And by the end, you're building this culture of, hey, we can see and hear and be silly. And then there's also a time to kind of get to work, which for me, the best leaders in my life have modeled when it's time to play and then when it's time to work, and then have left us feeling good about the work that we just did. And so I'm going to do the same. We have had an amazing conversation. For those of you who have stayed on with us up to this point, we do send out CEUs that you can submit to your local school district if you've been on. So I'm going to ask, if you have your QR code, go ahead and answer our brief evaluation tool and leave your contact information, and someone on our team in the next week or two will get you out a certificate that you can submit for a teacher educator CEU if that's something of interest to you. You're also welcome to email us if you'd like to do it at another time. So I'll give you just 2 seconds more to kind of grab that QR code and complete that evaluation. And just as a note, as we sign off, these are our upcoming webinars. We have one a month until May. We're doing life skill development, stress and pressure, a really neat one on perfecting practice, and then new policy in Ohio around coaches needing to know PBIS. We'll have a special training on that come May. As we leave you, we just want to say thank you for joining us at Coach Beyond. We're trying to reach 15,000 Ohio coaches by 2025. You can learn more about a training for your local school or district at our website, and shoot us any emails or questions that you have at coach_beyond@osu.edu. Andrew and Luke, cannot say thank you enough for spending this Monday evening with us. Luke, it's only like 5 p.m. in LA. You still got the whole night ahead, but thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. All right.